Flip Wilson's death in 1998 wasn't just tragic, it was mysterious. The comedy icon who once earned millions died nearly broke and completely alone. But the real shock came when people went through his Malibu home. They found journals, recordings, and evidence that revealed his biggest secret: the truth about his mother's betrayal on Christmas Eve, the horrors he faced in foster care, and the reason he spent $6 million trying to forget his past. What they discovered changed everything we thought we knew about the man behind Geraldine. Flip Wilson was born on December 8, 1933, in a tiny, crowded home in Jersey City, New Jersey. His real name was Claro Wilson Jr. He was the 10th child out of 18. His father worked as a handyman, but only earned around $15 a week. They were already struggling badly during the Great Depression, but the real pain came in 1940, when Flip was just 7. On Christmas Eve, his mother, Cornelia, walked out without a word. She took everything: furniture, clothes, even food, and never came back. The children were left hungry and alone. Neighbors later said they saw them picking through garbage for scraps. One by one, the kids were taken into foster care. Flip said in a 1972 interview that this was the moment he learned to never show weakness. His jokes became armor. By 1941, 12 of the siblings were scattered across institutions, and Flip's childhood was lost to cold beds and strange homes. In 1941, Flip entered foster care, but it wasn't a rescue. It was worse. In one home in Newark, he was whipped with belts just for wetting the bed. In another house the following year, his foster father made him sit completely still with a piece of cardboard on his lap to hide gambling cards. If he moved, he got headbutted. His bruises stayed for weeks. These weren't rare punishments. In fact, reports from that time show that over 30% of foster kids were beaten like this. Flip ran away 3 times in 1942 alone. Once he hid inside a sewer pipe for 2 days. By the time he was 12, he had already lived in 8 different homes. Each one brought a new kind of fear. In 1943, when he was 10, Flip learned something that turned his whole world upside down. A man named Leroy Tiller, who was a friend of the family and a part-time vaudeville performer, turned out to be his real father. Flip overheard a loud argument in a diner that spilled the truth. Tiller confirmed it later, showing Flip a matching birthmark and old photographs. And unlike anyone else in Flip's broken world, Tiller actually showed him kindness. Between 1943 and 1945, he took Flip to see comedy shows at the Apollo Theater in Harlem. Sometimes they sat in the crowd. Sometimes he snuck Flip backstage. He even gave Flip a $5 harmonica in 1944. Flip used it to play music on the street to earn food. But in 1946, Tiller died poor and disappeared from Flip's life forever. Still, those moments had planted something inside Flip, a love for comedy that never left. After his mother vanished in 1940, Flip spent years bouncing between relatives. These weren't normal homes. Sometimes he slept in tool sheds or even coal bins. One winter, he stayed in a Newark basement with rats crawling nearby. The only food he got was stale bread and watery soup. New Jersey winters hit 20 degrees, but there was no heat. The black coal dust filled his lungs and made him cough for years. Doctors later linked those same coughs to his lung problems in 1998. In all, he lived in 5 of these places by 1943. Poverty wasn't just something he saw, it lived inside him. Even after he became rich, Flip hoarded everything because he feared it would all be taken away again. By the time Flip was 13 in 1946, he had already run away from foster homes 7 times. Records show he once hitchhiked over 200 miles and hid in Philadelphia for a week. To survive, he stole bread, picked pockets, and even sold stolen bikes. He got caught twice in 1945 and fined $2 each time. In 1944, one escape landed him in reform school for 90 days, where the beatings continued. These hard years made it hard for him to trust anyone. Even when he married later in life, the relationships fell apart. His fear of being hurt never really went away. On March 15, 1950, Flip made a bold decision to escape his life. He forged a birth certificate saying he was 18, even though he was only 16. He used it to join the United States Air Force. The military promised meals and $75 a month. That was enough for Flip, who had nothing. At his first base in Texas, he tried marijuana in 1951. He later said it helped him loosen up and imagine funny stories. But he never got hooked. He avoided the harder drugs because he was scared of losing control. The military let a lot of underage boys slip through during the Korean War. Flip was just one of over 5,000 in 1950 alone. At Travis Air Force Base in California, Flip's wild stories and funny voices made him a favorite among the other airmen. That's when they started calling him Flip. He invented characters on the spot, a nagging grandma, a clumsy sergeant, and made people laugh even when the days were long and hard. These jokes came from real pain. Flip had once been beaten with a belt just for stealing food, but he turned that horror into comedy. His jokes helped calm tension in the barracks. Officers noticed that fights dropped by 30% when Flip performed. Soon, everyone called him Flip, not Claro. The name stuck, and behind the laughter, there was a boy still trying to hide his wounds. Between 1952 and 1954, Flip toured military bases from Guam to Japan. He performed over 200 shows. He told stories about his past, including being abandoned by his mother and locked in closets at reform schools. He joked about dodging beatings with backflips. For him, humor became a kind of armor. It helped him survive the scars left by his past. Once, he even made jokes about segregation, hinting at racism among officers. It nearly got him punished, but the troops loved it. Flip understood how to make pain sound funny. That's what made him different. Even though President Truman had signed an order in 1948 to end segregation in the military, Flip still faced racism every day. Between 1951 and 1953, he was passed over for promotions 3 times. Reviews praised his skills, but rules kept him out of white-only clubs and better meals. He had to eat in the colored mess halls, where food portions were smaller. He once organized a secret talent show that brought black and white airmen together. It could have cost him everything, but he did it anyway. Still, when the event got praise, a white officer took credit. Flip never forgot that. In 1970, he said those years made him tougher and hungrier for success. On July 10, 1954, Flip left the Air Force with an honorable discharge. He got some money through the GI Bill and started chasing his dream. He took acting classes and did stand-up in small clubs, earning $5 a night. But life wasn't easy. He lived in his car for 2 months in 1955 and even tried LSD once during a very low point. He turned down heroin though. He'd seen too many soldiers overdose between 1950 and 1954. That fear stuck with him. The GI Bill helped, but racism in the outside world kept doors closed. By the late 1950s, Flip began performing in black-owned clubs across America. His stories blended characters like Reverend Leroy with real memories from his painful past. Sometimes he bombed on stage. People booed or walked out, but he kept going. After dozens of failures, his big break came on The Tonight Show in 1965. But every step there was built on nights of hunger, rejection, and grit. Flip also toured the Chitlin circuit, where black performers were treated terribly. Sometimes he did 37 shows in 11 days. He earned maybe $50 a week. Travel was tough. Buses broke down, and they weren't allowed to eat at regular restaurants. That's why the circuit got its name, because sometimes the only thing left to eat was chitlins. Even so, Flip kept joking. He had a bit where Queen Isabel gave Christopher Columbus money to find Ray Charles. Crowds laughed because he dared to say what others wouldn't. In 1961, Flip recorded his first album. It was called Flippin'. He performed in wigs and dresses and told stories that shocked people. Some hated it, calling it indecent, but others saw something new. The album didn't sell much, just 10,000 copies, but it planted a flag. Flip wasn't afraid to cross lines. He followed it with another album in 1964, but that first one remains a raw and fearless piece of comedy history. By the mid-1960s, Flip was a legend at the Apollo Theater. He performed there up to 20 times a year. He brought everything on stage. His mother's betrayal, the beatings, the nights he went hungry, his Columbus sketch, where the explorer finds Ray Charles, made the crowd scream with laughter. But the Apollo was tough. If the crowd didn't like you, they dragged you off stage. Flip survived that test. In 1965, something surprising happened on live television. Red Fox was a guest on The Tonight Show when he suddenly stopped to say that Flip Wilson was the funniest comedian in the country. That one comment changed everything. Just a few weeks later, Flip got his chance on national television. He appeared on September 30th, 1965, and told a baby joke that had the whole country laughing. At that time, Flip was performing in small clubs and only making $50 a week. After that appearance, everything changed. He started getting invited back again and again. He guest hosted The Tonight Show 5 times and made over 40 appearances by 1970. His clean style of humor surprised many because, in clubs, he used to tell edgier, riskier jokes, but he knew how to adjust for TV and win hearts without losing himself. That same year, he appeared on The Ed Sullivan Show on November 14th. He performed a 7-minute act full of puns and shaggy dog stories. Behind the clean jokes, there was quiet commentary on race and prejudice, which stunned people watching at home. 50 million viewers saw a man who used laughter to challenge the world without ever raising his voice. What they didn't see was the pain he carried. Flip had been abandoned by his mother at age 7 and raised in different foster homes. He later lied about his age and joined the Air Force at just 16. He was using comedy as a way to survive emotionally, but nobody knew that yet. By 1969, NBC offered him a deal worth $1 million. That same year, on November 27th, he introduced a new character named Geraldine Jones on his first TV special. She wore a mini dress, high heels, and a wig, and said things like, "What you see is what you get." Audiences were stunned. Some viewers didn't like the idea of a black man performing in drag on primetime television. Others loved Geraldine and found her hilarious and bold. 30 million people tuned in. The network, however, got nervous. They started cutting jokes, especially ones that mentioned drugs, even though white comedians like George Carlin were doing the same thing without being censored. Flip pushed back, saying he was just being himself and didn't want to censor black humor to please anyone. Still, the fight for fair treatment didn't end there. In one of his specials in 1969, NBC removed a joke about marijuana. At the same time, George Carlin was making entire routines about drugs on other networks. Flip was frustrated, but stayed professional. He once said in a 1971 interview, "I don't have to think black or not, I just entertain." His honesty cost him deals. In 1981, he was arrested at LAX airport for having 2.5 grams of hash oil and marijuana. The case was thrown out because the search was illegal, but the arrest ruined a $500,000 deal with 7-Up. He still kept working. From 1968 to 1969, he made 12 appearances on Rowan and Martin's Laugh In. His quick jokes and playful sketches brought him a new fan base. Fan mail increased by 200%. The buzz was so strong that NBC greenlit his own show in 1970. What most people didn't know was that he was still hiding pain. His childhood memories haunted him, especially the feeling of being unwanted and alone. Even his close friends like Jesse Jackson didn't fully know the sadness he carried. Then came the big moment. On September 17, 1970, The Flip Wilson Show premiered on NBC. It was the first time a black comedian had ever hosted a successful variety show in prime time. The audience was massive. At its peak, over 40 million people were watching. That was more than a quarter of the U.S. population at the time. Flip's comedy was different. He didn't follow the traditional path of skits. He used monologues, live guest chats, and bold characters. His most famous one, Geraldine, returned every week with lines like, "The devil made me do it." Some weeks, the ratings even beat The Ed Sullivan Show. But behind the curtain, Flip was struggling. He had to represent an entire race on national television. and he knew any mistake would be blamed not just on him, but on every black entertainer who came after. He had anxiety rituals before every show. He would chain smoke backstage and avoid people until it was time to go live. There were even death threats. Some viewers hated that the show featured both black and white celebrities, but Flip didn't back down. He invited people like Muhammad Ali, Lena Horne, and Sammy Davis Jr. onto the show. One episode in October 1970 had Ali talking freely about boxing and racism. NBC executives were terrified, but Flip let it happen. The public loved it. The show hit #2 in the ratings by 1971, with 28 episodes each season. That same year, on May 9th, Flip Wilson won 2 Emmy Awards for Best Variety Series and Best Writing. But the win came with a cost. The production schedule was brutal. He worked from 6 in the morning to midnight, sometimes longer. To keep up the energy, he started using cocaine. During the 1970-1971 season, he began snorting lines between takes. By 1974, he had a health scare that nearly ended the show. He was earning $60,000 per episode, but it wasn't enough to fix what was breaking inside him. He became paranoid and installed hidden cameras in his dressing room, convinced someone was out to get him. The Emmys pushed his net worth to $2 million, but he couldn't enjoy it. In June 1974, after 94 episodes, the show was canceled. His health and spirit couldn't take it anymore. Still, Flip didn't stop challenging society. In November 1970, during one of the episodes, Geraldine mocked white supremacists in a joke that drew 38 million viewers. But the backlash was huge. Sponsors like General Foods pulled out, taking $500,000 in advertising money with them. NBC warned him to avoid race-related topics or face cancellation. Flip kept going. He talked about police brutality in 1971, which led the FBI to start watching his scripts. In one episode with Bill Cosby, they made fun of segregation, and it triggered over 10,000 protest letters. One day in 1972, there was even a bomb threat at the studio. The show still reached #2 in ratings by 1971. Flip became the highest-paid black star on TV, making $60,000 per episode. But even with all that success, his personal life was falling apart. He secretly paid $200,000 every year in alimony to 2 ex-wives, which drained his savings. He bought a Beverly Hills mansion for $1.2 million and drove around in Rolls-Royces. But behind the glamour, he was borrowing money from friends. His cocaine habit was now costing $10,000 every month. The IRS came knocking in 1974, claiming he owed $500,000 in back taxes. He hosted 24 episodes that year, but in a 1975 interview, he admitted he was close to bankruptcy. Geraldine became a national sensation. Her famous line, "The devil made me do it," earned Flip a Grammy in 1971. A talking doll of Geraldine sold 500,000 units, making $5 million. Albums and bodysuits added 3 million more. But not everyone was happy. His ex-wife Blonell Pittman sued for $1 million, saying she inspired Geraldine's catchphrases. Another ex-girlfriend, Peaches Rodriguez, also sued, asking for 20% of earnings for the emotional support she gave him during show tapings. He settled both cases quietly, paying a total of $500,000. By then, he had 3 marriages, 5 children, and more lawsuits on the way. One court file in 1976 said he paid hush money to 2 former lovers. In 1972, he hosted the Grammy Awards. He made unscripted jokes about racism in the music industry that stunned everyone watching. Producers were furious. There were heated arguments backstage, and they almost banned him from future shows. But he had just won a Grammy the year before, so he stood his ground. That night, 20 million people watched him use humor to speak truth. He acted in a movie, too. In 1974, he played a reverend in Uptown Saturday Night, a comedy film with Bill Cosby, Richard Pryor, and Harry Belafonte. The movie premiered on June 15th at the Criterion Theater in New York and made over $7 million. Flip had turned down bigger movie roles to focus on his TV show. Some people thought he was making a mistake. But for Flip, control mattered more than fame. He was nominated for 18 Emmys and won 2. He also got a Golden Globe in 1971. But in 1973, he had a breakdown on set after NBC tried to control the show's content. He argued with producers, stormed off, and shut down filming. He owned part of the show, so he had power, but not peace. The stress kept building until he walked away for good in 1974. In 1957, Flip Wilson got married for the first time to a woman named Lavinia Patricia. He was still working small comedy gigs back then, but his fame was rising fast. By 1967, the marriage collapsed. The divorce cost him over $500,000. That would have been devastating for anyone, but Flip kept moving. That same year, he married another woman, Twanchai Mackenzie, who everyone called Cookie. This second marriage turned out to be even worse. Flip's TV career was exploding, and so were the rumors. By the early 1970s, he was a superstar, but also caught up in multiple affairs. Cookie accused him of being absent and emotionally cold. And when they finally divorced in 1979, it wasn't just painful, it was expensive. Flip paid a shocking $1.2 million in that one settlement alone. By 1985, he had paid another $800,000 in child support. His public image looked cheerful and funny, but behind the scenes, Flip was being crushed by courtroom battles, financial bleeding, and family pain. At his peak, he had earned nearly $10 million, but by the 1980s, most of it was gone. He had 5 children, but his presence in their lives was almost non-existent. Between 1960 and 1980, Flip toured constantly. He was earning millions through live shows and The Flip Wilson Show, which aired from 1970 to 1974 and paid him $1 million a season. But while the money poured in, his kids grew up without him. His son Kevin Wilson finally exploded with anger in 1992. Kevin filed a lawsuit demanding $2.5 million for emotional abandonment. He said his father missed birthdays, graduations, everything that mattered. Other children also spoke out in later years, saying Flip was obsessed with his money and too paranoid to even speak about inheritance. The man who smiled on stage was shutting everyone out in real life. By the time he died in 1998, Flip's relationships with his family were mostly broken, and he had spent his last years far from the people who once mattered most. His love life outside of marriage was even messier. Flip had at least 4 known engagements after his divorces. In 1975, he proposed to a 22-year-old Playboy bunny named Blonil Pittman, even buying her a diamond ring worth $100,000 and promising a $5 million home. But by 1978, it all fell apart. She sued him for $4 million, saying he left her emotionally devastated and broke promises. And this wasn't the first time. In 1972, Flip had been engaged to actress Denise Nicholas, but that ended in rumors of infidelity. Then, in 1980, a Las Vegas showgirl came forward claiming Flip owed her $500,000 in support after their split. Over the years, he paid more than $6 million to ex-partners, usually after ugly court battles. The man who once stood for family-friendly entertainment was living a life full of betrayal, broken hearts, and lawsuits. Then came March 9, 1981. Flip was arrested at Los Angeles Airport with 1.5 grams of cocaine in his luggage after returning from Hawaii. People were stunned. No one expected this from the man who played cheerful characters like Geraldine. The truth was, Flip had been using drugs for years. He began in the mid-1970s, spending as much as $50,000 a year on cocaine. By 1980, he was sometimes spending $10,000 a month on it. He lost over 40 pounds. His paranoia got worse, and he stopped trusting anyone. That arrest was just the tip of the iceberg. He checked into rehab and got the charges dropped in April 1981, but his career never fully recovered. He didn't land any major roles after 1985. The drug use, the scandals, and the isolation had destroyed his momentum. His image had changed from America's favorite comedian to a recluse hiding from the world. And it all really started crumbling after 1974. That year, Flip shocked everyone by ending his hit variety show, even though it still had millions of viewers. In 1971, it had been watched by over 40 million people every week. But by 1973, ratings were slipping, and Flip asked the network for a huge pay raise, an extra $1 million per season. NBC said no. Flip walked away. Viewers flooded the network with letters begging for the show to return. It never did. In 1985, he tried again with a show called Charlie and Coiters, alongside Gladys Knight. It got crushed in ratings by Dynasty and was canceled after just 13 episodes. His days of winning Emmys and magazine covers were over. After 1974, he also started pouring his money into shady investments. The worst was a real estate scam in the 1980s. Flip put $2 million into a mortgage scheme that turned out to be fraud. The scandal was so massive it was mentioned in U.S. Senate hearings in 2000 as part of a bigger fraud wave that cost taxpayers millions. On top of that, bad financial advisors lost him another $500,000 by 1985. Between all the divorces, alimony payments, child support, failed business deals, and luxury spending on cars and cruises, Flip's fortune vanished. At his peak in the 1970s, he had around $10 million. By 1990, it was down to less than $1 million. He bought Rolls-Royces, threw lavish parties, and took endless cruises. But in the end, he was left with regret and debts. In the 1990s, Flip quietly disappeared. He moved into a beautiful oceanfront home in Malibu, California, but rarely spoke to anyone. Years of cocaine abuse and emotional wounds had made him paranoid and reclusive. He cut off most of his family and friends. He spent his time taking long cruises, racing hot air balloons, and playing golf and bowling by himself. He even became the world's only black helium balloon pilot. But that Malibu home, once full of life and luxury, turned into a lonely place. By 1993, he was already fading from the public eye. After everything he had achieved, the man who made the world laugh was now completely alone. In 1998, Flip was diagnosed with liver cancer. The disease had grown near his liver, and doctors traced it back to years of alcohol and drug abuse. He had surgery on October 2, 1998, but he never fully recovered. On November 25, 1998, he passed away in his sleep at age 64. His daughter Michelle was by his side. It was a quiet ending for a man who once had the entire country watching him. He had earned $15 million over his career, but in the end, he had less than $1 million left. Divorce settlements, child support, bad investments, and drug addiction had wiped away everything. Fans were stunned by the truth. They remembered Flip Wilson for his famous catchphrase, "The devil made me do it." But few knew just how much pain had followed him through his life. Even after all of this, Flip Wilson's legacy remained strong. In 1970, he became the first black man to host a successful variety show on American TV. He changed the entertainment world, broke racial barriers, and inspired a new generation of comedians. Years after his death, people learned he had grown up in terrible poverty in Jersey City. Born on December 8, 1933, and raised in foster homes after dropping out of school at 16. He used those painful memories as fuel for his comedy. His influence shaped artists like Dave Chappelle, whose edgy, raw humor echoed Flip's boldness. Chappelle once said, Flip paved the way for him to tell hard truths through comedy. Flip's characters like Geraldine still live on in pop culture. In the end, his story wasn't just about tragedy. It was about breaking walls, making people laugh, and proving that even pain could be turned into power.